Deluded, I'm back again.
Come on, Ian, man. Come on.
Let's go, man. Like Ian Wright just said there, people. Deluded, I'm back again. I've had Harvey on my channel a couple of times, and I'd imagine you know about his YouTube channel. If you don't, if not, make sure you're subscribing. The guy's a genius, man. Like we'll get onto it, but I was actually watching the video this morning, man. But how you doing, my guy? I'm happy to have you back, man.
Mate, it is awesome to be back. First of all, I'll say, love the shirt. It's the first time I've seen it on someone in
Come
person.
on, my guy. It's a bit tight, though. I can't lie. I should have got a bigger size, but it works all good.
No, I've been really good, man. Recently I've been very busy with finishing sort of uni course and things like that. But I'm back now. I'm free. I'm happy. I'm ready for the Euros, and I'm really happy to be back on the channel, of course.
Appreciate that, man. You know what? I actually haven't asked you. How are you feeling about the Euros with Gareth Southgate, anyways? On the eve of the tournament.
I've got a really quick video that I'm going to try and put out on my channel, actually, on England as a team. But as we all know, it's the last saloon, really, for Southgate. It defines his tenure, whether we win the Euros or not. I think we come now into the tournament in slightly more tumultuous state than he would have liked, with absentees and injuries. And also, I think we could have probably done with an extra 1 or 2 warm-up games. But yeah, I've got a video coming slightly later on it. I've been a fan of Southgate for a long time. But is he the manager that's going to take England to a Euros? I'm not quite sure on that.
And I agree with you. And I do think, including myself, I think people are generally quite harsh on Southgate because he's got to a World Cup semi-finals. He's got to a Euros finals. Obviously, you know, you can't. And it's a bit of a difficult one because, as you know, as Brits, we're quite pessimistic. Like, we're pessimistic going into the tournament. Then we're so optimistic. Then we're back to being pessimistic. And like, I'm only 29. And I would argue that arguably I can have my question marks about Southgate, kind of alluding to what you're saying, where we've got all these exciting young attacking players if he can get the best out of it. But in my age range, I've seen what Rooney, Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes, the whole list, and they haven't really done what we're seeing Southgate do. So if we don't expect to win major trophies, what can we really do? In my opinion, though, I'm very pessimistic, bro, going into this Euros, purely because, like you said, there could have been 1 or 2 more warm-up games. I don't necessarily think he's found the balance with picking the informed players versus the experienced ones. I think the centre-half pairings makes me quite pessimistic. I think there's too many questions in midfield, and actually at left-back as well, really, and actually depending on who plays right back. So I hope to be proven wrong, but wait, and I also think Rashford and Harry Maguire are bigger misses than people give them credit for, especially Harry Maguire, if I'm completely honest. Who would you, last thing on the Euros, who you got to win it?
Well, I've had Germany for a little bit, actually, but mainly that's because I'm a massive Nagelsmann fan. And I'm going to enjoy, I think, watching them against Scotland tonight. And Nagelsmann was really the main one that if he had wound up at Liverpool or Manchester United, I would have been really concerned for sort of the longevity and the ceiling of their projects. I'm a big fan of Nagelsmann. I think England are one of the favourites. I think Portugal have a very, very good squad, and Martinez has won 12 out of 13 with them coming into things. So as we know with the Euros, it will be mostly potluck, I think, as well, seeing which side of the draw. England have got quite a difficult side of the draw if we do progress.
Yep.
But I think I would edge the Germans at the moment, actually.
You're the first person to not say France, you know. Like, I would have said France. I mean, yeah, I don't think anyone can look beyond them.
Boring,
it is kind of boring. I think you're right about the Germans, man. I expect the Germans to be up there. Obviously, they're on home turf. Who would you have as dark horses then?
Dark horses, I guess you could. I don't know if a Portugal or a Germany do count because they're dark horses in terms of not many people would expect them to win. But in terms of going far in the competition, you know, you would expect them to be in the last 4, last 6 anyway. I think Turkey look quite strong. I think Romania could surprise a few people as well. But yeah, that's what I've got.
Do you know what? A lot of people think it's going to be like when Greece won the Euros, that it could be that. I don't quite think it's going to be kind of that. I don't know if Italy counts as dark horses, but I would have Italy personally because they won it last time. And like we've seen for the last few years, whether it's the last Euros, whether it's, you know, when they won in 2006, everybody knows Italy's a strong footballing nation. But it's like when we, like we've kind of done now, when we're talking about favourites and things, we don't talk about Italy. And I just think they've got the mentality monsters. They know how to take their moments. And as you know as well, international football, of course, it's about talent and quality and tactics and things. But it's almost like when you look at Real Madrid in the Champions League, they're not necessarily or haven't been the best team across 90 minutes. But the moments or the opportunities to take advantage of, they do that. And I think Italy do that better than everyone, really. So we'd have to see. It'd be an interesting tournament. I'm sure you're going to be watching it from a tactical point of view, from a normal footballing fan point of view. Like myself, we're probably going to, you know, watch players and entice ourselves and make videos about whether they could be the best of players for Arsenal. I actually saw a video of yours and it moves this on greatly, where you kind of predicted or attempted to predict what we could do in the transfer market. What can you tell us about such, man, where Arsenal is concerned?
I think it's really difficult this window because there isn't per se going into this summer a sort of perfectly sized Declan Rice hole in the wall that fits a project. I think there's definitely not a one size fits all this summer. And as I've maintained, I've actually, as time has gone on, I've become relatively flexible about the who and the specifics of the player that we sign, as long as they address and fix a more generalized list going into next season in terms of what we can maximize off the market. My four main things looking at the transfer market that, if addressed, I will be content no matter sort of the fund allocation and the who's, are maintaining midfield progression on the ball at the end of our sort of current midfield cycle. As you see, obviously Xhaka left last summer now, but we're on the verge of having Thomas Partey. It looks like depart if we can find the right club to offload him to. Jorginho's probably reducing in another 400 to 500 minutes as he moves to what I think the plan is, more of a fourth midfielder next year. And then you also, of course, have Mohamed El Neni leaving the club, which means there's a big hole potentially in the middle of the side when you're looking at more redundancy on the end of Zinchenko and his role in the team, and again a potential transfer there. You're looking at quite a hole in the middle of the park in terms of progression of the football that we need to look at solidifying, whether that is with a marquee signing or with distributing funds in a different place. That's one core element. The other, which is tied into it, is improving our left-hand side dynamics. And look, there's many ways you can comprise your left-hand side to do this. One of the things that I've been really growing on in recent weeks is an overlapper from fullback, because I think it all depends, and this is what I've been emphasizing, we're only really going to know Arteta's long-term projection for this team when the first signing puts pen to paper. So that's what I'm really excited for. But if, for example, he sees Martinelli as the long-term left winger for this football team, you need to be able to guarantee him getting closer to goal. And that can be done in a number of ways. Of course, an overlapping left back is one, someone who can naturally hold width and create and push Martinelli into the half space. You can also do that, as we've seen from a Gabriel Jesus before knee injury, drifting laterally from centre forward. You can also do that from a strong footer overlap from left centre mid, which the only profile in the squad who could do that is someone like an Ødegaard, or on the market, or not on the market, but a profile like Camavinga. So there's lots of different ways you can create that dynamism on the left-hand side, but improving the left-hand sided dynamics, again, it ties into progression. There's I think, the discussion of whether we need a true passer in left centre mid or someone more ahead of the ball in the block. Again, it all comes down to how Arteta envisions the midfield going forward. Does he see our flexible build-up that we ended this season on, with sort of the two pendulum central midfielders moving either side and pivoting either side of the fixed six, which was Partey, and the other one drifting higher? Does he see it like that and we can share responsibility around our build-up? Or does he see more of a fixed pivot in the left centre mid, more rigidly tucking in next to Declan Rice, who I expect to move deeper? And then Ødegaard has a more auxiliary role in dropping deep and all phase play, but also having more license to float on top of a sort of pivot platform to the left-hand side? Or does he see Ødegaard sticking deeper? And then raises the question of, you don't want a passer as your left centre mid. You want
need someone who's going to run.
Yeah, exactly. You want more of a between the lines carrier, which is something indirectly I want to add to the squad. But I don't quite have it on my list of priorities for the transfer market, because I think we either address that indirectly by looking at the left-hand sided dynamics, or we find internal solutions. Hopefully Saka can be given a slightly freer role next season and move more centrally between the lines, so he can be that focal reference point for carrying on the right-hand side. If you get Timber in that fluid relationship with a left centre mid like Tomiyasu and Rice played last year, sort of interchanging high and low and in and out, left and right, then you have between the lines coverage there with Timber and hopefully a sort of more malleable left centre mid. So that's something I want to maximise. But again, maybe you go and get that on the market. Another name that's been growing on me is an Eberici Eze. And that's, again, if Arteta sees long-term, the between-the-lines carrier coming on the left-hand side, which is something when we redress our perspective on Arteta's Arsenal across his whole tenure. Of course, this season we've seen more of that left shadow strikery stuff with Kai Havertz moving towards sort of the tip of the diamond in midfield. But across his whole tenure, it's been the left centre mid that's been mainly the deeper. And that's the same for Pep Guardiola at Manchester City. So a lot depends on him. But that's only 2 out of the 4 things I want to address this transfer window. Rice and Saliba cover is 3rd on the list. And I think this also increases our engine room dueling in the middle of the park by giving us an additional body there. Personally, I think that can be done in one move in someone like an Amadou Onana. And he can cover Saliba by being more of an inverted centre-back. But again, we can go on to detail in that later. I think for an Onana type signing and where you weigh it off against others, again, it just comes down to allocation of funds. But the final thing I want addressed is being better. And this is one of the most important things, being better in the margins or the moments. And that can sound quite broad to people. So I'm going to try and specify that right now. I'm talking in particular in transition, because I'm not necessarily looking for more goals. That's not what I'm looking for, but I'm looking to win very specific moments. On the transition, you can do that by, let's say, you buy a winger. You want someone to add to the squad, that sort of unstoppable ball carrier. That's why in my videos, I'm looking more at players like Eze, who would be more of an interior, I think, for Arsenal. But I'm looking at players like Eze, like
strong
Nico,
ball carriers.
Yeah, like Pedro Neto. Something that helps counteract our right-hand-sided dominance, certainly, and helps us in those big moments, when you want the killers in the Bayern Munich away legs in the Champions League, or
Individual brilliance
on the break away at the Etihad. If you're looking for a centre-forward to do this, well, then you start looking at, yes, you want being better in the moments, but you're looking under slightly different parameters. Then I want a really aggressive, not necessarily carrier, but a really aggressive channel runner who can, like I said, run the channels, but also possess their own sort of gravity where they can drag and draw defenders around. Suddenly sort of 2 or more people have to stick by them to stretch a mid-block that we struggled against last season, to stretch a mid-block in behind. Obviously, at the same time, that creates more space in between the lines for your more pocket players to receive in. But I want to become better in the margins, in the moments. I think Arteta has stressed a lot in his interviews after the season that as a team, we have maxed out every sort of performance index that that would normally warrant a league title. But when you're looking at the margins, at the moments, there's arguably those little extra steps that you have to go. I mean, we can get into it later of where I would personally want to allocate funds. Again, I'm quite flexible on where we do that, as long as these sort of list of 4 things are addressed. But it also depends on the futures of players like Emil Smith-Rowe and Fabio Vieira. If Arteta feels that these guys have some of those sort of moments and final action qualities that can be imbued into our squad when we're talking about Vieira's ball striking or creative range over really a large zone. Smith Rowe's large range of influence, zone of influence over his carrying. It just depends where the futures lies for these guys as well. So this summer, there is a lot of contingencies and a lot of factors that would decide where we go forward. And I think only Arteta truly knows this.
And I think you're bang on the money there in that regard. You put that articulate. I think everybody has to be aware that we have to be fluid. There could be players we want and could have a willingness to sign, but that could, you know, you look at someone like Benjamin Sesko. It looks like we was down to do that deal, but he wanted to stay. Or someone like Joel Hatto. Or there could be players that want to sign for us, but their clubs don't want to do business. Or the club might want to do business and we want the player. Someone maybe like Onana that might be out of our price range in terms of value for money. So I think we have to be fluid. In particular, when you was talking about midfield, I might be being a bit vague with it, but I think Mikel Arteta wants all of it. I think he wants to be able to play a lone six and rotating eights, 2 6s in an 8. You know, Declan Rice playing as an 8 on occasion. You know, Arteta talks about us being unpredictable. I share your opinion with that left 8 sort of position that needs to be addressed, purely because, take nothing away from Granit Xhaka, I think we lost a lot. I think with Granit Xhaka not being there and the inconsistencies at left back, I do think while Mikel Arteta's Martinelli has to take like responsibility for such, I do think these factors have harmed him. I need someone that can dictate the tempo of the game. Like, I know I'm reaching a bit and they're not easy to find, but if you could find someone like that has the kind of facets that Santi Cazorla has with a bit of physicality, I think we're doing quite well. I do think it's intriguing to see what we'll do at left back, because, you know, Timber and Tomiyasu can play there. But as you said, we don't know what Arteta is thinking. All of these players are multifunctional, which has kind of been the theme. So I'm not too sure. If it was up to me, we'd sign 2 midfielders, another 6 and an 8, with Jorginho probably signing a new deal, and us not knowing the futures of, like you said, Fabio, Partey and Smith Rowe. Is probably one this year and then one next year. I got a lot of stick on YouTube for saying that I think Mikel Arteta loves Jorginho. I think the fans do as well. I just think logically, if you understand football, he's probably had to use Jorginho more than he would have liked to because of owing to the injuries with Partey and things like that. And I agree with you in that I'm quite flexible in the market. I do think, and I would love to know your opinion, like just humor me. If you had to, we have a budget and you have to spend significant funds in one area of the pitch, we'll get onto striker in a more in depth, but you could say up front, you could say centre mid. I don't know how your feelings are, but you could say centre back for you want. What area would you go for? Because for me, I think it's the central midfield. I know games are won or lost in either box, and you know they say defense wins titles and goals win games. But for me, central midfield, because I think Declan Rice and Odegaard were 2 pieces of a 3-man puzzle, essentially. I think if we address that, you will see Odegaard play to another level. And kind of what you were saying, we could have an option of, you know, Odegaard being a bit more further forward because we've got someone in build-up play, or likewise, sometimes he's dropping deep. I just want the best of both worlds. And I think Mikel Arteta is probably looking for a functional midfielder. And it's like what you said, ultimately, we just don't know. Like, we see the reports. And one thing I've liked about Arsenal is, as you know, in this present day, nothing's really a secret, but we're linked with players. All of these journalists say we're about to get them. And then the news comes out saying signing them was wide of the mark. So you just never know what Mikel Arteta is planning. I mean, one thing I do want to see addressed beyond the obvious is the size of the squad. I'm being very harsh, but I only think there's 12 to 14 players generally that are trusted. Like, let's just assume there's a strongest 11 playing on the football pitch right now and Trossard's on the bench. So that's 12. And then you've got at present Zinchenko, Gabriel Jesus, obviously forms a factor. And I don't think that's sustainable. Last season, we did quite well. We did actually well to cope with injuries, but that's something that's got to be addressed, especially if we want to, you know, fight on all fronts. I share what you said around Saliba, Declan Rice, and I'd extend that to Benjamin White in that I think us fans, we make a big song and dance about rest, but as long as they've recovered well, these players also want to play. I think it's kind of fine, but it would be nice because I do think if there's, you know, if we've got one defensive injury and then we've got someone who's not necessarily fit, then I think the structure of our team becomes imbalanced. For instance, for God forbid, but if Saliba had to miss a game, Benjamin White goes right back, goes centre half, someone has to go right back. And then there's holes in our side really. But if you had to spend significantly or invest significantly, you know, you could say a player if you want, but what area would you go for? Because for me, central midfield, I think that's the one area that I think you could fix without breaking the bank. But if I had to, for me, it's that area.
Yeah, a couple of things there. I would say the dichotomy I've sort of posed on my channel, again, I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong for it, but I think this window is all about whether you fix any squad holes and depth issues that, for example, we might have in terms of not having a legs replacement in transition for Declan Rice or a Saliba backup, and fortifying the build-up of the squad by investing across the midfield and defence. How you balance that with adding the extra details or the profiles that we look at the squad now and we say, okay, you don't have, whether that be a flying fullback or a true 1v1 specialist on the wings or a bully boy 9. And I think the balance and the argument that has definitely at times I think has swung me is I'd rather fortify the build up and fortify any squad holes before
The hub and the spine of the team, yeah.
Before adding the cherries on top. And I think it's really difficult because I do want to add details, but I think you don't actually, to add those sort of key moments that we're talking about, I don't actually think you have to spend 100 plus or Declan Rice sums of millions on that. I don't think it goes sort of Arsenal buying killers for the margins and for the moments equals 100 million. I think that's something that is assumed, but not actually the way. I think we could buy, for example, a wide man for more sort of Kai Havertz money and below, but also use them like Pep Guardiola maybe has done for a Jeremy Doku, and manage their the game states that we're allowing them into. And I think how we balance, like I said, the details and fortifying the foundations is going to be a key facet of this window. I think the marquee for me has, like I said, been in central midfield, but it really, like you said, it genuinely does depend on Arteta's own projections. I would love to buy a proper hybrid 6'8" who can sit deeper a lot alongside Rice, for example, and have sort of the against Liverpool, the Jorginho Rice offset heights in the pivot, allow whoever that partner alongside Rice is to be really punchy and piercy with their passes through the lines, but also able to pivot and pendulum with not just Martin Odegaard, as he will still occasionally join the build up and overload, and then move higher and be that sort of between the lines ball carrier. And here, when you're adding loads of different facets to the play, that's when you sort of get looking at, you're buying sort of a generalist and you need to fork out quite a bit of money. If we can't find that player, then you're looking buying a specialized ball carrier and then a specialized progressive option in terms of on the ball passing. I mean, maybe there's an argument to get a really cheap player altogether in someone like a Yusuf Fofana from Monaco, but where I've always stood with a Fofana or even an Onana signing is that it's not just one of them. I think it's one plus someone else with them. But yeah, for me, it is still a central midfielder, someone able to rotate with Timber. Again, if Arteta sees Timber in one of the fullback positions, because we have to remember something that I've said on my channel and got, again, a little bit of stick for actually, is how Timber, certainly in moving more into a midfield diamond, can have a longer term solution in central midfield and in the higher areas. Whenever Mikel Arteta has spoken about Jurrien Timber, although where he's played on the pitch has certainly been counter to that, it's always been about his middle and final third qualities. How you were talking earlier about someone who can control the tempo of a game. Timber completely gets that. I think people mistake him for a carry first player, but he actually sets the tempo really well. And he adds that sort of dynamism and block breaking through carrying on top as an added detail. He controls the tempo really well. He slows things down before he speeds things up. He sees the whole picture. He can manipulate a block really, really well. He doesn't really have any angle biases in how he plays like some of our other midfielders certainly do. He's sort of a 360-degree player and can be, operating.
That's why his right foot is so good on the left, really.
In many
even
zones.
though that might not necessarily be where they lock him down, but multifunctionalism.
But then if Zinchenko suddenly goes, then you have still my long-term vision for Timber as the specialist inverted fullback profile in the squad. So then it raises another question on top of all of these that we have been posing of the future of Timber and where he's seen in the team. So like I said, I'll come back to it. I'm just relatively flexible where we allocate funds and who we sign, as long as those 4 key things I outlined at the start are addressed, because I think it's a good window if that happens.
And I think I'm with you in that. I think, I'm sure Mikel Arteta probably has more on the agenda, not just for this season, but beyond. That man's probably planning 10 years ahead. But if there was 2 positions I would like to really focus on, obviously I've said central midfield is one. I am wary about defensive options, because on the face of it, we are well stocked, but a couple of injuries, especially around centre half, we could be in trouble. So I do think about that. But I would like a winger, kind of piggybanking off what you said. I would like a specialist ball carrier. I would like someone that's a different option. And also, I would like someone that really and truly could rotate out with Bukayo Saka on occasion. I do think people do a lot in relation to Bukayo Saka, because if you listen to the man himself and what Arteta says, I don't think you're going to see any sort of real sustained periods of rest. But I don't want to run the man into the ground. If we focus on the striker, now I'm a bit conflicted, and I'd love to know your thoughts. On one hand, when we're talking about moments and improving the squad and cold-hearted killers, and you look back to December of last year, I would be lying to you if I said I wouldn't want a striker in general, someone that's going to get 20 odd goals on top of what Kai Havertz is doing and all the other players have the capacity to do. But I do believe, while I believe that on one hand, I do believe we're maybe overstating the need for a striker, because we've got 91 Premier League goals and over 100 in all comps. And I don't know if Kai Havertz's form is going to continue into next season. I hope so. But I do think we can quote unquote get away with it. But where is your thoughts in relation to a striker? Do we oversell the need for a forward as Arsenal fans?
Yeah, it's interesting, because I always maintained when Kai Havertz was signed that, along with being an option at the tip of a diamond as sort of a true Raumdeuter, he was a centre-forward upgrade for Arsenal. So I think if you're in the boat where you see Kai Havertz as that, it sort of places another perspective on the need for an Arsenal number 9. I think the same way you're talking about an upgrade on Havertz in the centre forward and whether we can do that, you can upgrade on Havertz. You can. But it's whether you see that, let's chuck a name out. Let's chuck Victor Osimhen out there.
I knew you was going to say him,
I'll come back to Sesko. But with Osimhen, do you see enough marginal gain on Kai Havertz by splashing 120, let's say, million on a Victor Osimhen? If you do, then that's brilliant, and that is all the justification you need for getting our superstar attacker being a number 9. Like I've said, the probably most complete option for that marquee attacker signing, if you want to go down that path.
Please say the Newcastle lad.
Yeah, this summer is probably, in terms of optional on the market, is someone like an Osimhen, because if you look at Isak, is sort of the feeling, I think, around all the journalists and all the media is that he's going to be priced out and locked out of a move away this summer. And then if you look at wingers like Marcus Rashford or Rafael Leao, I'm just listing names here, not generally points of preference. But if you look at the potential superstar left wingers, they're also locked out. So I think if you want a superstar attacker this year, then Osimhen is your guy. But at the same time, which the boat I'm in, is that if you want, I think the general more upside for the squad is actually improving off the wings and off the left-hand side, especially because in my squad building head, we've invested certainly somewhat of Kai Havertz for the upside that he has in the centre-forward position, and the potential and growth that he has in his ball striking capacity, his ability to dominate static zones like someone like an Osimhen already does so well, and sort of have his own sense of gravity in and around the box. I think for the squad, we're still probably better off long-term buying someone off the left, for example, but then you're delaying, of course, that marquee signing for another year, which I probably think is maybe still the best option. It's what you think is the here and now for Arsenal. If you think Havertz was signed as the 9, it seems slightly academic to go a year later and sign a Victor Osimhen. If you want a marquee superstar attacker now, Osimhen is the option, and there's no doubt he would upgrade Arsenal. And I think he's the only attacker out there available on the market that would truly transcend Arsenal's attack right now. But then you say, oh, our options are more open if we delay that, fortify the foundations in the build-up, make us the best build-up side in the world, and make us, again, in terms of depth across the back line, as solid as we were out of possession last year. And you try and sprinkle on a couple of details on top instead of splurging all your money on the front line. I think that's probably, again, that's the boat I'm slightly in at the moment. I still see Havertz as enough upside in the 9, and I think there's too little, or there's, for the money being spoken about, I don't know if the cash spend on someone like an Osimhen is worth it enough to upgrade on Kai Havertz.
And I think you're piggybanking on what you said. I think you hit the money. I think the illusion of Osimhen is better than the reality. Make no mistake, I would be happy and ecstatic if, if we did sign an Osimhen or anything like that. He's a cold-hearted killer in front of goal. As much as we've got, record points on the board and we had all those statistics and 91 goals, there has been occasions where I would have liked a natural goal scorer, someone that's essentially been paid for a number of years to bag. But I just think with Osimhen, it doesn't make sense. You're looking at anything from 100 to 120 million euros. He's probably on 250 grand a week. You factor that over maybe a 4 or 5 year period, it's probably out of Arsenal's budget. Maybe, had Kai Havertz not have reverted back to playing up front and his form, maybe Arsenal's thinking might have been different. But I think that's allowed us to kind of coast a bit. And I also feel with Osimhen, I think being a striker is a very difficult job in today's day and age, because you could score 20 goals. People will talk about your heat map and you don't pull into the channels, yada, yada, yada. Likewise, you could do all the other great things, but if you don't necessarily score, which was kind of Kai Havertz prior to this, there's question marks. I do like the way Kai Havertz is speaking lately. Obviously, being at Arsenal, his confidence has risen. Even his comments the other day for Germany saying, I am a striker and things of that ilk. So I do think that could continue. I just think with Kai Havertz, along with a number of things, nothing to do with Havertz, I just feel going into next season, there's more questions than answers. Like, I know we're going to score goals. The last 2 years we have, but the question is who? I think Bukayo Saka is the only one I'd truly be shocked if he doesn't return a healthy amount of numbers, because he's done it for the last few years. I just think Arsenal will do what you said and say, you know what, if there's a market opportunity, which it appeared Sesko could have been, we'll get it done. If not, we'll move away from it. And rightly or wrongly, one thing I have liked over the last 3 years in particular, maybe 2 with Mikel Arteta, is sometimes I've been angry, the last 2 Januaries not signing anyone, for example, or this January and the one in between, the one 2 years ago. Apologies, almost died. As I was saying, one thing I've liked is that was Arsenal of old. We would have just signed players for no absolute reason. Like, it's better than nothing. But we're only doing things that needs to be done. And I do think we're okay up front. I think even myself, I do think we oversell it. But like you said, sometimes it just doesn't make sense. I mean, we've spoken about Gyökeres before. I would like Gyökeres at the carpet. I just think he's too pricey. In relation to a winger, I like the illusion of Marcus Rashford at Arsenal with what Mikel Arteta has done rather than what we're getting. I think there's too many unanswered questions. Zertsky would have been a good alternative, but that seems like that one's gone away from us. I would wait for another 12 months. If Mikel Arteta isn't 100% convinced with what's on the market, personally, I'd wait another 12 months. I know the dynamics of Sesko's changes because his release clause is gone, but I think that would have fitted us to a T. Would you take Rashford or Jadon Sancho?
I would say, just before I get onto that, if you'll allow me, I just want to
go on, man.
A couple of things you've said, because I didn't want to give the illusion that it was Havertz at 9 or a 9 signing or bust, because I think
it's both, man. I think many people on the channel could see what you mean, bro. But go ahead.
Because Kai Havertz can coexist with, let's say, an Osimhen signing. You will just see a shift of his role, certainly becoming maybe more of a tactical Swiss Army knife in the squad.
It's a squad, we've been saying, squad.
I've been stressing the potential usage going forward of a diamond in this squad since the very first game of the season and pre-season. And there's always, I myself give a critical eye to it, because I think the box is always a better midfield option in terms of the avenues for progression than a diamond. But when you look at the stacking of interiors at the club, a potential 9 arrival onside or on top of a really good version and growing and developing Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz at the tip of a diamond, playing off sort of a more physical, or just as physical, I should say, number 9, who sort of takes all the backboard qualities that we like in Kai Havertz and actually runs the channel, allows Kai Havertz to move in alongside of him.
Kai Havertz gets onto the second balls essentially.
Of course, and then you allow, with someone like, again, let's say an Osimhen, it doesn't have to be Sesko's in the same ilk of profile. You have them staying in the central channel, but of course pulling wide, especially to the left, and that doesn't just allow the space centrally dedicated for Havertz to pull into off the shoulder, but also it gets Martinelli close to goal. And then you're talking about an Osimhen actually fixing the overlapping issue on the left-hand side and not actually needing to source it from a left back or a left centre mid. So just want to clear up that, like, Havertz can coexist with a 9 and still could potentially start. I don't like the diamond as a long-term thing, but I think we will see it more as a low block breaker, and especially a game state structure when we're chasing a game, like we saw against Manchester City in the Community Shield final, West Ham when we were losing in the EFL Cup, or Lens in the Champions League. The diamond hasn't gone away, it is still there situationally. And then I'll also say it's a lot depends on the 9, is where do you want the goals to come from? Because I've been big on my...
It's got to come from everywhere, bro. Yeah. It can't just come from the Xhaka, or we're in trouble.
But exactly, because on my channel I was saying I would not feel good. I mean, you have to be ruthless, of course, but something still doesn't quite seem right for me. If we were to go and buy a marquee superstar forward, great, everyone, including myself, is buzzing, but we hadn't quite yet maximised what we have in-house. And that can, like we said, that can stretch to an Emil Smith-Rowe or Fabio Vieira, but that can also stretch to prioritising getting both our wingers closer to goal, which has to be high on the agenda in terms of large-scale team play moving into next season. So there's still a couple of variables you have to think about then, and how it isn't just an Osimhen or a Havertz, and it isn't just an Osimhen for a focal point source of goals, because I think specifically Martinelli has so much more legs to grow as an endpoint to our attack. I think that's where he's best utilised, when he's finishing off.
He's running in behind and he doesn't have too much time to think.
Yeah, that's when he's best utilised. And of course, Saka, I did a whole video on it, but Saka centrally...
Yeah, I watched that. That was quality. Check that out, folks, man.
People cannot even comprehend what they will be watching if Saka has sort of more of the reins on the right-hand side. And again, it's all these questions for Arteta to discuss, but it's going to be an exciting summer.
It is going to be an exciting summer, man. It really is. What do you make of Gabriel Jesus? Because for me, I know he's probably gone into that way. He's more of a squad player, but I'm not giving up on him, man. I think he'll be back next season as well. And also, on top of that Gabriel Jesus question, is it time for Mikel Arteta to be judged purely on silverware? I ask you this just as what people want to hear. Now, me and you both know it is a lot more deeper what Mikel Arteta is doing than that, but I'm sure you get asked on that. And I've got a duty to ask you. So, yeah, how do you feel about those?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it next season, it is time to win trophies. You know, as you're looking to move from phase 4 of Arteta's project into phase 5, the whole point of that is not just winning one, or how Arteta sees it. It's not just winning one Premier League, it's sustained dominance. And he wants to do that over multiple competitions. So I think it's totally fair to say next year, it should be a trophy winning season for Arsenal. That should be the natural next steps taken. Of course, there are so many intangibles you have to factor in for, but I think it is totally fair to say. And sorry, what were the other questions? Remind me.
What do you make of Gabriel Jesus?
Gabriel Jesus, yeah. It's so sad on Gabby, because we often, I think as fans, we now look back on certainly those first 6 months before his knee injury, and we actually sort of cloud over our eyes of how much he gave us, and how obviously Zinchenko had a role to play as well, but how he gave us sort of the belief and the will that we couldn't just or that we had a spark.
Changed our lives, like Arteta said.
Yeah, and I think it goes further than that. He gave us a sort of spark in a game that sort of, however difficult things were, take away any sort of finishing issues that you want to bring up in front of goal. There was always a spark. There was a vibrancy, a verve to this Arsenal
He was a
team
warrior.
that suddenly a sort of fire could catch, and you felt it catching, and that's what Jesus ignited, and you felt that that was really propelling Arsenal as sort of a new full flame of life under Arteta. So I think it's harsh to forget that with Jesus, because the knee injury, I'm not sort of well versed in sort of that sort of physiology and things like that, but I really hope he hasn't lost the dynamism and he can come back and work
acceleration, man, explosiveness,
and work on his game, and sort of work on his fitness off the summer. And he comes back a much different player, because if he doesn't, then of course you're looking at a 200k a week player who's playing a peripheral role as probably now a hybrid forward who could, I think if he's fully fit, that even if he's not in our best 11, he plays probably 50% or the majority of the minutes just by virtue of being able to play over the front line. But it's just whether you see, signing another left winger, and then does Martinelli become that hybrid frontline option? They're just questions that have to be raised. So I really hope Jesus can come back with that added spark again. Because as a dribbler, as a 1v1 dribbler, as a breaker of a winger in that sense, he's never going to be the guy that I want, that unstoppable ball carrier that can carry a team up with him 60 yards that I'm looking to add in the transfer market. But as a 1v1 dribbler, he's probably the best at the club at the moment. So you hope there's still something to offer for Gabby Jesus.
And one thing I like is competition. One thing I like is the players have relished it, but to have the option of Gabriel, Jesus all across the front three. Kai Havertz can play in a couple of roles. Don't really want to see him in midfield, but yeah, he can play up front. Martinelli, obviously Saka is Saka. You marry that with either or a winger and a striker, and we're kind of cooking. And I think fans need to, kind of get comfortable with competition. You look at Manchester City, it's only throughout the years, there's only a select few of those players in the core that really have played week in, week out. And even someone like Kevin De Bruyne has found himself hooked in difficult moments or found himself on the bench. I would kind of caveat that with what we see at Arsenal. Unless your name is, to a degree, Saliba, Benjamin White, or Martin Odegaard and Saka, then I wouldn't quite say you're dispensable, but you're susceptible according to form. As we saw at several points last season, whether it was because of injuries, loss of form, Mikel Arteta simply put, wanting to try things, certain players got more football, got less football. And I think us fans need to kind of comprehend that is a factor at play as we move forward. I also think our fans, I understand you have to look forward as a football fan or as a football club. You can't kind of look at past glories. And I'm not saying Zinchenko or Gabriel Jesus couldn't be moved on, but I do think some fans have a short memory with a lot of these players. And I do think Gabriel Jesus won't be sold, but I do think he's kind of in that realm with Partey and Kirill and Smith Rowe and them kind of players who won't be actively forced out. But if offers come, I'm not going to say Arsenal won't stand in your way, but they've probably been more open to doing business than they might have been in previous years. So I have to see. A couple of other questions before I let you get out of here, man, because it's the end of the season and this is my chance to have you on my platform. I want to know who your player of the season is, man. Like, give me your top three.
It's a difficult question.
Very difficult.
I think Arsenal really, or certainly I think fans, we can blame ourselves slightly this year for underappreciating and misgiving Bukayo Saka.
Facts.
I think, I think he was arguably my player of the season, just because I think we're not even privy yet to, as I kind of alluded to earlier, quite how or sort of the range of solution that he has, especially in the center of the pitch. We're seeing him post up numbers when he is not just doubled up on, but tripled up on, when we've really
kicked every minute.
We're really struggling for a counterbalancing force on the left-hand side. I think a lot of what Arsenal do is moving heaven and earth and doing absolutely everything in our power with what we have on the pitch to just make Saka, for one split second, marked like your average winger. And if that happens,
it's dangerous.
we're in,
but not fast.
You know, and he can still generate from positions when he doesn't need to beat his man per se. He's self-sufficient as an attacker. I guess what I mean by that, as in, he doesn't have to always have loads of the touches or have loads of space. He can generate.
He's a cerebral, calculated robot, essentially.
Like, and it's like the numbers that we're seeing now are, I can't stress it enough, they are a fraction of the levels that Saka could go to. Of course, your Rices and Salibas, I would say the three most indispensable players, as you were saying earlier, are Rice, Saliba, Saka. The reason I wouldn't put Ødegaard in there is that there are still some specific game states where I don't think he is absolutely essential to us, Martin Ødegaard. But I think that's for a whole other show, or like even series.
We've got plenty to do over the summer, man. We'll save that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, give it to me in order. 1, 2, 3.
I think Bukayo Saka number 1. I would put Declan Rice and William Saliba 2, Martin Ødegaard number 3, alongside Ben White as well.
Ooh, and this is where it gets very difficult, man, because I do think, kind of piggybanking on what you said, I think people are very underappreciated what Saka has done. And I think because it's not, we know he's amazing, but it's not a breath of fresh air anymore. And I think, I can't remember the period in the season, but he must have scored like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 goals in a row, really. And people underestimate.
It was 7 in 5. It was
something crazy.
It was from just after we'd got back from Dubai, the Liverpool Premier League game, then going into Burnley, West Ham, etc. Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about. I think people sleep on that kind of factor. Naturally, there's been times where Ødegaard and Saka have looked particularly better across the season, or looked a bit slower. So I do think Saka is in there. I do think big Gabriel Magalhaes is very underappreciated based on that. I think he's got a big case. You said Benjamin White as well. Ødegaard is up there. Declan Rice is up there. You know what? I would say for me, first, Declan Rice, because I think in comparison to the rest, he's kind of maintained his level throughout the season. And when he has dropped off, the whole team kind of has. So I would say Declan Rice for me first. I think there's a bias, including myself, purely myself, to be towards the attackers. And I think, you know, obviously the defenders, people will, you know, when Saliba has pocketed Haaland, he'll get his credit. But it's goals that get people off their seats. It's goals that make the highlights, but it's defense that wins titles. And I've seen my defense, you know, obviously there's times we could do better, but we've kept a clean sheet against City. They've stood tall against not just every big team, but every kind of potent attacker there's been, really. And they relish it, really, and they're getting better and better. So I would say Declan Rice first. I think I have to go kind of what you did with a tie. I have to go Declan Rice first, Gabriel and Benjamin White kind of tied for second, and then I'm kind of leaning towards the Sakas and Ødegaards, if I'm honest with you. But then again, in fact, no, I would say they're my players of the season. I would say underrated player. I don't really think he's underrated, but I have to give Trossard his flowers. I think he really came into his own. But then even that, could you argue Kai Havertz, bro? Because
I think
he's done great.
It's a different debate of who our most indispensable players are, and then maybe who are the players of the season. Maybe there's sort of a grey line of how you sort of separate both of them. But
because 2024, Kai's been our best player, arguably, along with Trossard.
I mean, Kai in the final 10 games of the season got 13 goals and assists. You know, he got 13 goals alone from centre forward, and he started there 14 times in the season in the Premier League. So, I mean, that's sort of what we're talking about. With Kai as a centre forward, we actually only lost 1 game last season, and it's not enough sample to really justify saying anything else long term, but it's definitely food for thought. We, won 13 out of the 14 games that we played with Kai. We scored something like 28 goals. So it's food for thought.
You know how sad that is that you say that, because as you were saying that, and I was looking back, I just thought, and we still couldn't win the league. Like Manchester City are evil, man. Like it's just a shame that Pep Guardiola is here, man, because the last 2 years we should have 2 Premier League titles. But at the end of the day, this is the dynamics, man. And if we just got 3, 4, 5, 6 more points on the board, we could have been somewhere. I think that's what's really going to keep Mikel Arteta awake at night, in that we've been near enough perfect, but arguably with Pep Guardiola, perfection is not enough. There is no margin for error. And I don't know if you've seen it, but you look at Saliba's comments, like he kind of alluded season will drop points, but from March they're kind of unstoppable. So just look at last season and assume that this season it's going to be exactly this, and areas for improvement. But arguably, you know, I mean, we've been following Arsenal. There was never been a world where me and you, we've said about 5-6 players who recent. Just the other day, it was Bukayo Saka, no debates, and before who's who. But yeah, man, Harvey, this has been amazing, man. Let people know where to subscribe to this guy, whether it's tactical analysis, normal thoughts, the sick at his job. You know, he's got what? You got over 10k subs. Come on, man. Support him. But let's hear from the horse's mouth where you can find him, man.
Yeah. YouTube. Again, there'll be, now that I'm properly into sort of starting next week, I'm going to look to be more regimented in 3 per week as and when I get to not just do this casually, YouTube, push myself on and elevate.
Nah, man, you can do this, bro.
But looking into, you know, I'm partway doing coaching badges. So things are only going to on Twitter, it's the same thing. Gratian Harvey, I'll be posting more on there. People like you enough for giving me a platform because it really helps. And yeah, I mean, for, you know, more views, more life for both of us.
Come on, my guy. I mean, as you got free time, man, you know, we got to get these done more consistently, man. And I look forward to it during the summer. People, again, if you're too lazy enough to follow what he just said, all you got to do is click his YouTube name in the description. Better yet, in the title. All his information from YouTube to Twitter is in the description. Go and show a fellow Arsenal fan, a knowledgeable Arsenal fan, some love. There's plenty of people who talk and spout nonsense. So why not show someone that clearly knows what they're talking about some love, man? So yeah, let us know your thoughts. Do you agree, disagree with what we're saying, people? I'm sure we've touched on a lot of talking points throughout this video. Where do you think Arsenal need to improve? But yeah, man, I'm going to let you and Harvey and everyone else get out of here. And till we meet again, man, come on, you Gunners. Like, comment, subscribe. Peace, man. Harvey, bless, man. Peace.
See you later.
Come on, my guy.
You always just go,